The sterling fortune. The wrought iron gates, emblazoned with a stylized S, swung open silently, allowing Silas Sterling's chauffeured Rolls-Royce to glide up the long, perfectly manicured driveway. The mansion, a monstrous monument to excess built of imported Italian marble, loomed ahead, its many windows reflecting the setting sun like 1,000 greedy eyes. Inside, crystal chandeliers dripped light onto priceless Persian rugs, and the air hummed with the low thrum of the central air conditioning, a constant reminder of the sterling fortune's ability to control even the weather. Silas entered his study, the scent of aged leather and expensive scotch filling his nostrils. The room was a shrine to his ambition, lined with first editions and dominated by a massive mahogany desk that had once belonged to a railroad tycoon. He poured himself a generous measure of Glenfiddich, the amber liquid swirling in the crystal glass. The day's stock reports lay spread before him, numbers dancing in his vision, each one a potential avenue to even greater wealth. He paced before the floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing out at the sprawling estate. Acres of manicured lawns, a private lake shimmering in the twilight, and beyond that, the dense woods that bordered his property. It wasn't enough. Never enough. He craved more, an empire that stretched further, a legacy that would echo through the ages. He wanted to be more than just rich. He wanted to be a legend. A soft knock on the door interrupted his reverie. "Come in," he barked, his voice sharper than he intended. Lily and Rose, his twin daughters, entered hesitantly. They were mirror images, with their blonde hair and wide, innocent blue eyes, but their demeanors were worlds apart. Lily, ever cautious, hung back slightly, while Rose, her adventurous spirit barely contained, stepped forward. "Good evening, Father," Lily said, her voice barely a whisper. "We drew you a picture," a Rose chimed in, holding out a piece of paper covered in crayon scribbles. Silas took the drawing without a word, his gaze sweeping over it with a dismissive air. It was a childish mess of colors, depicting what he assumed was their family. Himself, a large stick figure with a crown, and two smaller figures representing the girls. He felt a surge of irritation. They were a distraction, a hindrance to his goals. "That's nice," he said flatly, placing the drawing on the edge of his desk, careful not to let it touch any of the important documents. "Now, run along. I'm busy." Rose's face fell slightly, but she quickly recovered, grabbing Lily's hand. "Good night, Father," they said in unison, turning and hurrying out of the study. Silas watched them go, his expression unreadable. He took another sip of his scotch, the warmth doing little to thaw the coldness in his heart. He returned to his ledgers, the numbers once again claiming his attention. The sterling fortune demanded his focus. His daughters were simply collateral. Unfortunate byproducts of a life he never truly wanted. A father's cruel plan. The clinking of porcelain against china usually soothed Silas. Today, it grated. He lingered in the doorway of the breakfast room, unnoticed, as Mrs. Gable, the cook, lamented to Martha, the maid, about the rising cost of eggs. And the children, bless their hearts, they eat like little sparrows, but sparrows eat every day. Shoes, dresses, it never ends, Martha, never ends. Silas felt a coldness settle in his stomach. He'd always known children were an expense, a necessary evil to continue the sterling line. But hearing it quantified, hearing the endless drip of expenditures, chipped away at his carefully constructed financial edifice. Gable's words echoed the anxieties already gnawing at him. The market was volatile. The diamond mine in Kimberley had yielded less than predicted. He needed to consolidate, to protect what was rightfully his. He retreated silently, a new plan hardening in his mind. Lily and Rose. They were sweet, undeniably. Lily, with her quiet observations and gentle touch. Rose, a whirlwind of scraped knees and insatiable curiosity. He saw them as fragile, delicate things. Perhaps too delicate for the harsh realities of his world. His gaze fell upon the old rowboat, overturned and gathering dust in the boathouse. Rotting timbers, peeling paint, a relic from his own childhood. An idea, dark and insidious, bloomed in his mind. It was a solution, brutal perhaps, but elegant in its simplicity. An arrangement. A reallocation of resources. Over the next few days, Silas became a phantom in his own home. He showered the girls with fleeting smiles and distracted pats on the head, all the while meticulously preparing the boat. He patched holes with tar that smelled of bitter earth and regret, his calloused hands moving with a grim purpose. He replaced a missing oarlock, the metallic clang echoing in the cavernous boathouse like the tolling of a death knell. Each action was a betrayal, a silent promise broken. He told himself it was for the best, for the sterling legacy. He repeated it like a mantra, trying to drown out the small voice of reason that whispered of innocence and love. One evening, he called the girls to the dock. The sun was setting, painting the river in hues of fiery orange and bruised purple. Lily, ever cautious, held his hand tightly. Rose skipped ahead, already mesmerized by the swirling eddies in the water. "I have a surprise for you both," Silas said, his voice a strained whisper against the gentle lapping of the waves. He pointed to the boat, now bobbing precariously in the twilight. A little adventure. Nightfall on the river. The air lay stagnant, thick with the odor of turned earth and the perfume of unseen blossoms. Silas coughed, the sound amplified in the unnatural hush of the night. Almost there, girls. Not much further. He held their hands tightly, each tiny fist clutching his skin with a desperate fervor he pretended not to notice. Lily stumbled, her small voice a mere breath in the gloom. "Pupper, my shoes are sodden with mud." "Quiet now," as Silas snapped, the edge in his tone sharper than intended. Rose, ever the bolder, chirped up. "Will we see the glowbugs, Pupper? You promised." "And so you shall," he replied, coaxing warmth into his voice. "The very best ones flicker by the water, amongst the reeds." Phosphorus spilled from his mouth, saccharine and clinging. He steered them to the river's edge, where a dilapidated skiff was moored to an ancient willow. Flaking paint gave it the look of blistered skin, and a single oar lay lopsided within, suggesting long neglect. Lily's eyes grew wide, not with anticipation, but with a muted dread. "Pupper, that boat looks, or wobbly." Silas chuckled, a mirthless sound swallowed by the dark water. "Nonsense, little dove. An old tub, perhaps, but sound enough for a brief jaunt. Just to glimpse the fireflies, remember?" He hoisted them aboard, one after the other, their slight weight barely registering on the craft. The timbers creaked in protest, releasing a mouldy exhalation. "Pupper, are you coming, too?" Rose inquired, her usual animation dampened by the disquieting atmosphere. "Of course," as Silas assured them, remaining firmly planted on the bank. "But first, I need to loosen this rope. You two sit tight and watch for the fireflies. They'll be winking right above the water." He fumbled with the knot, his movements abrupt and unnatural. He avoided their gazes, intent on the task, the rough rope grating against his skin. With a final yank, the boat was adrift. The current, unseen yet palpable, tugged at it, nudging it away from the shore. "Pupper?" Lily's voice trembled with rising fear. "Where are you going?" Silas manufactured a smile, a ghastly grimace in the fading light. "I'll be right here, keeping watch. Just a little trip to see the glowbugs, then I'll meet you further downstream. It's a surprise. He gave the boat a final, resolute shove, sending it gliding further into the darkness. He watched their small forms shrink into silhouettes against the black water, their voices dissolving into the night. He lingered for a moment longer, the river chuckling at his feet, before retreating into the trees, the sound of his passage muffled by the rustling leaves. Rusty's watch. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, painting shifting patterns on Rusty's tawny coat as he rested on the cool riverbank moss. A crawdad, armored and wary, sidled beneath a flat stone, unnoticed. The bobcat, a connoisseur of finer fare, had recently dined on a succulent field mouse and now luxuriated in the warmth. His domain, a hushed sanctuary of rustling willows and sun-baked earth, typically offered unmatched serenity, punctuated only by the lively splash of fish and the whispering breeze. He prized this solitude. Then, the whimpering began. Faint at first, a fragile thread against the river's gentle song, it steadily amplified, escalating into a piercing lament that vibrated in Rusty's sensitive ears. He flattened them, a low rumble vibrating in his chest. The sound was familiar, unwelcome. Human children. Messy, unpredictable, and inherently dangerous. Experience had etched that lesson in his memory, a youthful indiscretion involving a chicken coop culminating in the sharp sting of buckshot and a lingering aversion to those clad in trousers. He edged towards the embankment, hugging the ground. The distress cries emanated from downstream. Parting the reeds, he spied the source, a small, dilapidated boat, swept along by the current, pitching wildly. Two small figures huddled together, their faces slick with tears. The fragile vessel drifted inexorably towards the rapids, the churning water a ravenous beast poised to devour them. Rusty's muscles coiled. He harbored no affection for humans. They trespassed on his land, defiled it with reeking refuse, and occasionally wielded thunderous devices that spat fire and death. Yet, the sight of the vulnerable youngsters, their tiny hands intertwined, stirred something deep within his primal core. An instinct, ancient and unwavering, to safeguard the helpless. He hesitated, battling his ingrained aversion. The rapids posed a lethal threat, even for a seasoned swimmer like himself. And proximity to humans, the risks were undeniable. But the boat gained momentum, propelled by the relentless flow. A miscalculation, a collision with an unseen obstacle, and they would be plunged into the raging torrent. He imagined them consumed by the unforgiving river. A frustrated snarl escaped Rusty's throat, a sound of reluctant resolution. He couldn't simply observe their demise. He was a creature born of the wild, sculpted by the untamed landscape. He was a survivor, embodying resilience and resourcefulness. And sometimes, survival transcended self-preservation. It demanded defending those incapable of defending themselves. Fear lingered, a frigid knot in his gut, but the impulse to assist burned brighter. He was a bobcat, a predator, a being of shrewdness and power. And he would rescue those children. The sinking boat. The river, playful moments ago, turned treacherous. The current, a gentle nudge before, became a relentless shove, grabbing at the little boat and tossing it like a toy. Lily gripped the splintered edge, knuckles white. Rose, hold on, as she cried, her voice thin against the roar of the water. Rose, usually so quick with a joke, was silent, her face pale. She clung to the opposite side, eyes wide as the trees lining the bank blurred into streaks of green and brown. The boat spun, rudder useless against the river's fury. Each wave that crashed over the bow soaked them to the bone, the cold water stealing their breath. Then came the grinding screech of wood against stone. A shudder ran through the boat, throwing them both forward. Lily's head cracked against the mast, a sharp pain blooming behind her eyes. "We hit something," Rose screamed, scrambling back. Water gurgled ominously at their feet. A dark stain spread across the bottom of the boat, widening with terrifying speed. Lily, fighting back dizziness, peered down. A jagged hole gaped in the wood, the river rushing in to claim them. Panic choked Lily. "We're sinking." Rose, momentarily stunned, found her voice. "Help! Somebody, please help us." Her cries were swallowed by the wind and the rushing water. Lily joined her, tears streaming down her face, mingling with the river spray. "Help! We're going to drown." On the riverbank, nestled amongst the roots of an ancient willow, Rusty, the bobcat, twitched his ears. The children's desperate cries, laced with terror, scratched at something deep within him. He'd heard their laughter earlier, their innocent joy echoing through the woods. Now, only fear remained. He tried to ignore it, to burrow deeper into the comforting earth, but the image of their small, terrified faces flashed behind his eyes. The boat listed sharply to one side, the hole now a gaping maw. A wave washed over the deck, carrying with it one of Rose's discarded ribbons. Lily grabbed her sister's hand, her grip desperate. The water was up to their ankles, icy and relentless. "We're going down, Lily!" Rose shrieked, her voice cracking. "Help us!" Lily screamed again, her voice hoarse. "Please! Anybody!" Rusty rose slowly to his feet. His muscles tensed. He knew the river's treachery. He'd seen it claim others. He shook his head, a low growl rumbling in his chest. He was a creature of the wild, not a rescuer of lost children. But the sound of their fading cries tugged at something he couldn't ignore. A bobcat's courage. Rusty crouched lower, the wiry muscles in his haunches coiled tight. He'd been tracking a rabbit, but the scent had vanished, replaced by the high-pitched sounds drifting from the river. Lily and Rose. Their boat, the dilapidated thing their father had probably laughed about as he pushed it off the bank, was foundering. The current, swollen by recent rains, ripped at the small craft, pulling it towards the churning white water further downstream. He watched, conflicted. He was a hunter, a solitary creature. Interference was not in his nature. But the girls. Lily, with her gentle hands that had once offered him a sun-warmed berry, and Rose, whose fearless curiosity had led her to mimic his hunting crouch, their small faces now etched with rising panic. The boat tilted sharply. Rose screamed, a thin, piercing sound that cut through the roar of the river. Lily reached for her sister, her face white with terror. That was it. Rusty's decision solidified, a primal urge overriding instinct. He couldn't watch them drown. He launched himself from the bank, a tawny blare against the green undergrowth, hitting the water with a jarring splash. The icy shock stole his breath. He'd swum before, chasing elusive fish in the shallows, but this was different. The river was a raging beast, clawing at him, trying to drag him under. He fought back, his powerful legs churning, his body low in the water, using the current to his advantage where he could, angling himself towards the struggling boat. The river smelled of mud and decaying leaves, and tasted bitter as he gasped for air. The world narrowed to the frantic splash of his paws and the increasingly desperate cries of the twins. He was stronger than he thought, driven by something he couldn't name. The boat was closer now, a splintered wreck tossed like a toy. He could see the terror in their eyes, magnified by the distance and the swirling water. Lily was clinging to the broken mast, Rose huddled beside her, both soaked and shivering. The current slammed him against the side of the boat. He scrabbled for purchase, his claws finding purchase on the rotting wood. The whole thing threatened to capsize. He had to be careful. One wrong move and they'd all be swept away. Safe on the shore. Rusty churned through the water, the current a relentless hand pushing him back. He ignored the burn in his muscles, focusing only on the bobbing silhouette of the boat against the darkening sky. Fear, raw and primal, clawed at him. He had to reach them. He angled his body, fighting the river's will, and finally, blessedly, felt the blunt nose of the boat nudge against his outstretched paw. Grab on, he barked, his voice raspy. Hold tight. Lily's pale face peered over the edge, her eyes wide and glistening. Rose, usually so boisterous, was silent, clinging to her sister's arm. The boat groaned, taking on more water with each passing second. Rusty pushed with all his might, his claws scrabbling against the slick wood. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, the boat yielded, inching towards the muddy bank. He could smell the damp earth, the sharp scent of pine, a promise of solid ground. There! Lily cried, pointing a trembling finger. Roots! A tangle of gnarled roots, exposed by the eroding bank, reached out like grasping fingers. Lily, with a surge of adrenaline, lunged, her fingers hooking around a thick root. She braced herself, then reached for Rose, pulling her forward. I've got you, Lily gasped, her voice strained. Rose scrambled, her smaller hands finding purchase on another root. The boat, relieved of their weight, listed sharply, then slipped beneath the surface with a final, mournful sigh. Rusty, exhausted but relieved, watched as the twins, shivering uncontrollably, hauled themselves onto the bank. Mud plastered their faces and clothes, and their teeth chattered in unison. The air, thick with the smell of wet earth and impending rain, felt colder than the river itself. Lily collapsed onto the muddy ground, pulling Rose down with her. They huddled together, their thin dresses offering little protection against the elements. We made it, Rose stammered, her voice barely a whisper. Lily nodded, unable to speak, her body racked with shivers. She looked back at the river, its dark surface swallowing the last remnants of their boat. The water seemed to mock them, a vast and indifferent expanse. They were safe, for now, but stranded in a wilderness, alone and vulnerable. The reality of their situation, stark and terrifying, settled upon them like a shroud. Agnes's discovery. Agnes Plumtree often walked the riverbank in the late afternoon, her sturdy boots sinking slightly into the damp earth. The gentle susurrus of the water usually soothed her, but today a discordant note pricked her ears. A thin, reedy sound, like the wind caught in dry grasses, but undeniably tinged with distress. She followed the sound, her brow furrowed, until she rounded a bend and saw them. Two small figures huddled beneath the drooping branches of a willow tree, their faces streaked with dirt and tears. A bobcat, lean and scarred, sat sentinel beside them, its golden eyes fixed on her with an unnerving intensity. The animal looked utterly exhausted, its fur matted and mud-caked. "Oh, you poor dears," Agnes breathed, her voice a barm in the gathering dusk. She approached slowly, her hands outstretched in a gesture of peace. "Are you lost?" The smaller of the two girls, bolder perhaps, peeked out from behind her sister. We don't know where our pupper is," as she whispered, her voice trembling. Agnes knelt, her joints protesting slightly. "And who is this handsome fellow watching over you?" she asked, nodding towards the bobcat. The older girl, clutching a tattered doll, spoke for the first time, her voice barely audible. "Rusty saved us. From the bad water." Agnes didn't press for details. The story, she suspected, was etched on their faces, in the tremor of their small bodies. "Well, Rusty," she said, addressing the animal directly, "you've done a good job. You all have." She looked back at the girls. "Come now, you must be hungry and cold. Let's get you to my cottage. It's not far." Rusty didn't relinquish his post until Agnes had coaxed the children to their feet. Then, with a weary sigh that seemed almost human, he rose and limped slowly behind them, keeping a watchful eye on the little procession. Agnes's cottage was small, but overflowing with warmth and the scent of wood smoke and lavender. She settled the girls by the fire, wrapped in thick woolen blankets. She offered them warm milk and honey cakes, which they devoured with a ravenous hunger that tugged at Agnes's heart. While they ate, Agnes examined them more closely. Twins, she realized, though not identical. One, the bolder one, had fiery red hair and eyes the color of moss agates. The other, more subdued, had hair the shade of ripened wheat and eyes like the summer sky. "What are your names, sweethearts?" she asked gently. The red-haired girl swallowed a mouthful of cake. "I'm Rose," she announced. "And this is Lily." "Well, Lily and Rose," Agnes said, her voice thick with emotion. "You're safe now. You're home." She glanced at Rusty, who had curled up near the hearth, his eyes half closed. "All of you are." That night, as the girl slept soundly in her spare room, nestled amongst patchwork quilts and feather pillows, Agnes sat by the fire, her brow furrowed in thought. She didn't know the circumstances that had led these children to her doorstep, but she knew one thing: she wouldn't let them down. She would give them a home, a family, and all the love they deserved. The river had delivered them to her, and she would be their harbor. A new beginning. The scent of wood smoke and lavender replaced the river's dankness. Agnes Plumtree's cottage hummed with a quiet energy, a stark contrast to the hollow ache that had settled in Lily and Rose's small chests. Agnes, with hands that smelled of earth and a smile that crinkled her eyes, showed them to their room. 2 small beds, covered in quilts stitched with whimsical animals, sat beneath a window overlooking a riotous garden. "Settle in, darlings," as she said, her voice a gentle rumble. "Supper will be ready soon. Stew! Your bellies must be rumbling." Rose, ever the braver of the two, ventured, "Where's Pupper?" Agnes' smile faltered, just for a moment. He won't be joining us. But you're safe here now. I promise." That night, nestled between soft sheets, Lily felt a familiar pressure on the bed. A soft thump and a warm weight settled near her feet. Rusty. His fur was rough against her skin, and his purr vibrated through the mattress. He was exhausted, his eyes holding a deep weariness, but he was there. The days that followed fell into a comforting rhythm. Agnes taught them about the herbs in her garden, their names rolling off her tongue like poetry: chamomile for sleep, rosemary for remembrance. They helped her gather eggs from the clucking hens, their small hands clumsy but eager. Rusty visited every day, patrolling the perimeter of the cottage, a silent guardian. He'd sit by the girls as they played in the meadow, his amber eyes watchful, occasionally batting a playful paw at a stray butterfly. Word trickled in from the village. Silas Sterling had vanished. His grand estate stood empty, a monument to his ambition. Some whispered of bad investments, others of shady dealings with men who preferred silence. The river, it was said, had a way of swallowing secrets. Lily and Rose didn't speak of him. The absence was a gaping hole, but Agnes filled it with warmth and laughter. Years passed. The girls grew, their laughter echoing through the cottage. Lily, gentle and thoughtful, learned to weave tapestries filled with scenes from their life: the cottage, the garden, Rusty bathed in the golden light of dawn. Rose, adventurous and bold, explored the surrounding woods, her pockets always filled with interesting stones and wildflowers. Rusty grew old, his movements slower, his fur faded. He still visited, though. Every evening, he'd lie at the foot of their beds, his presence a tangible reminder of their shared past, a testament to his unwavering loyalty. When he finally passed, Agnes buried him beneath the old oak tree in the meadow, the one where he'd often napped in the sun. Lily and Rose never forgot Rusty. They never forgot the river, the boat, the fear. But they didn't dwell on it. They had a new beginning, a life filled with love and laughter, nurtured by Agnes's gentle hand and forever marked by the bravery of a bobcat who had chosen them as his own. They were the Sterling sisters, yes, but they were also Agnes's girls, and they were free.